Checking valve clearances is something riders love to ignore. Ignoring it doesn't go away. Checking your valves can be tricky and intimidating if you've never done it before. I'm going to show you how to do it on your Benelli TnT 135 in Kraken's garage today. Let's get cracking. Metal expands as it gets hot. The clearance from your bike's camshaft and valves are there to account for that expansion. If your clearances increase, you're going to get a noisy valve train. If your clearance decreases, your valves might not be able to close all the way. When that happens, the hot exhaust gases burn the valve seats. That's when you have serious problems. So pay attention to this video in detail if you're working on your Benelli. The valve service intervals on your Benelli TnT 135 are the first one done at 600 miles with your first service on the bike, and every 5,000 miles after that. For the rest of the world, 1,000 kilometers, and every 6,000 kilometers after that. The servicing intervals are different for every single make and model of motorcycle. Some parallel, but not very many. You must read your service manual and your owner's manual as well. Fortunately, the TnT 135 uses the old school screw type adjusters, so your camshaft gets to stay right where it is. Most modern motorcycles, you have to remove the bodywork, the gas tank, and the air box just to get to the valve covers. Then if your bike valves need to be adjusted, you have to remove the camshaft. When you get to that level of big of a job, like removing the cam, that's above my pay grade, and that's when I'll take the bike to the dealer and have them crack open the motor and handle that type of thing. Valve clearances will be listed on a sticker on your bike frame for all other bikes. Unfortunately, the Benelli bike does not have this sticker. Once again, a disconnect there. They should have those clearances printed on a sticker on the bike along with your tire pressure and critical information to operate and maintain your vehicle. You're going to have to use trial and error till you get it done right. Don't forget to recheck your clearances during the entire process. Please, don't forget to check them. If you're wondering why I'm wearing like 3-4 different outfits during this video, is because I've filmed it over 5 or 6 days. It's been very frustrating doing this video, to put it mildly, because I can't get a straight answer from the factory. When you are turning the flywheel and you get to T1, do you adjust your intake valves there? And there's also a T2 mark on there. And is that for your exhaust valves on the rear side of the head of the cylinder? Nobody can give me a straight answer. I called my dealer, and I'll play back the message he gave me back as well. My dealer doesn't know, but he tells me what they've been doing and have had success moving forward. So that's the direction I'm gonna march in. I contacted Benelli, I emailed them, never heard another word. I contacted Facebook to the Benelli TnT 135, 125 forum, and I got 4 different answers. There's so many different answers from so many different people. It's really disconcerting for me that people are jacking with their bikes by not adjusting the valves properly. It is mission critical, and people need to understand that you are doing irreparable damage if you adjust your valves improperly. Adjusted them first time, both exhaust and intake on T1, okay, and the bike ran fine, and I'll throw up a short clip of it running. Cold start. I adjusted it to T1 for the intake and T2 for the exhaust, and the bike ran fine that way as well. So there you go. Here's the message I got back from my dealer.
Hey Eric, Ron calling back from Carnage Performance. I apologize I didn't get back to you yesterday. I did get to talk to one of my techs. As far as doing that timing, checking the valve space when you're looking at those timing marks, they just rotate off top of the center. They don't even pay attention to the timing marks. Just because that's just how it's always been done, and it's just natural for them. So, but I do believe T1 is intake and T2 is exhaust, but don't quote me on it. I want to say that's what it is, and I couldn't find anything in the manual. But like I said, they just do theirs off of top dead center and kind of rotate them. So if you have any other questions, give me a holler back. All right, thanks a lot. Bye.
So there you have it, another waffly answer. I got 2 replies on that one. The dealer just measures top dead center from the piston and adjusts them both. Ron says T1 for the intake, T2 for the exhaust. So there was 2 different answers again. This is the downfall or disconnect, and people need to understand this when you buy a lesser product that has put in the R&D to get the information out to the people. And Benelli, this is a black eye for Benelli as far as I'm concerned. Their manual sucks, their dealer network information that they've supplied their dealer sucks. You have to kind of wing it and figure it out. So I'm gonna gingerly ride it and check it and recheck it with both of them at T1 and see if I notice any noticeable difference moving forward. Right now it's bloody cold, so I'm not getting too many miles in on it, but we'll see how she goes moving forward. A few items linked down in the description in my Google Dropbox. I have the service manual as well as the parts manual for the Benelli TnT 135, so you can download a soft copy. Strongly recommend you do so. On the service manual, download a soft copy, pull up pages 61 through 63 and print them off. And there's your step-by-step instructions on how to adjust the valves on your bike. For those of you new to motorcycling, adjusting the valves was always kind of scary to me, and I always felt like it was above my pay grade. Once you do it once or twice, it's easy peasy, don't worry about it. So some simple basic tools, a little bit of knowledge, being thorough, double check your measurements and things of that nature, your torque settings, you'll nail it in a minute and it'll be easy to do in the future moving forward. A few items you're going to need: the shop manual specific for your make and model, which I'll provide you a link for down below. Wrenches needed to remove the bodywork, gas tank cover, gas tank. You're going to need a quarter or a large size coin if you're from elsewhere in the world, and a pair of pliers, and I'll explain that in a little bit. A leaf type feeler gauges, and they must be in metric. This bike is metric. You cannot use standard measurements for your feeler gauges. If you don't have one, just go to your AutoZone, your local parts store, O'Reilly's, something like that. They'll have them in there. I'll put a link in the description to one at Amazon, as well as for all the tools that I use on this particular service. You're gonna need a bunch of rags and a torque wrench. There's different types of valve adjustments. There's hydraulic tappets or lifters. There's desmodronic valves found most exclusively on Ducatis. Shim over bucket adjusters, shim under bucket adjusters. I'll put a link in the description as well. Revzilla did a really good article talking about each type of way to adjust your valves. Fortunately, the Benelli TnT has the screw adjuster, so you don't have to clown around with shims, which to me makes it a lot more easier. And this is actually a very simple task, so let's get to it. First thing we're going to do is remove our seat. Set that aside. Second thing is you're going to need to jack it up and get the rear wheel off the ground, okay? And before you jack it up and get the rear wheel off the ground, put the shifter and put it in 5th gear. And I'll explain that in a little bit, why we need it in 5th gear. First thing we're going to do is remove this gas tank shroud. There's 6 screws on the inside of this that you don't need to remove. It just comes off as one piece. So you have 1, 2, 3. You have another screw up here for 4, and then 3 on the other side for a total of 7 bolts. I'm going to fast forward through this part, but let's punch it out real quick. One other tip I might add is to have a magnetic parts holder. And what the beauty of this is you can stick it anywhere on the bike and stick anything to it. It'll keep your bolts from disappearing when you go back to use them. The last 2 screws you need to remove are right up in here. There's one on each side. Okay, there's a total of 6 Phillips screws. 1, 2, and 3 up here and 3 on the other side. You're going to need a short stubby to remove these because the forks are usually in the way if you already have it on a lift. Might be better if you remove them before you put it up on the lift so you could turn the handlebars lock to lock. Now, if we removed all our screws, don't forget you got to pull your gas cap off. Now, if you're working in the garage in wintertime, be careful of running propane heaters and things of that nature in your garage. Fumes of gasoline are no joke. This whole shroud over the gas tank should pop right off. Okay, you're going to need two things to do before you do this next step. First thing you want to do is put your gas cap back in to make sure you stop the fumes from coming out that could create a problem. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, and we'll remove those real quick. And our gas tank is now free. Okay, now that the gas tank is free, what we're going to do is pick it up, lift it, but don't pull too hard because you've got all kinds of breather hoses and fuel hoses connected to it. If it doesn't want to come, then find out what is holding it up. It should release freely. We're going to swing it out this way and rest it on the frame. What you need is a soft cloth to go on the frame to make sure that the gas tank doesn't scar your frame up. Perfect. And now we can get to the meat and potatoes of the bike, the head of the motor. There's 4 screws that here we're going to remove to get the valve cover off, but first we're going to take this clamp off this breather hose. Just squeeze this spring and then get a flathead screwdriver once you're squeezing it and kind of wedge that hose. And just kind of push it out of the way. We're going to use an 8mm socket to remove these 4 bolts that hold on the cylinder cover head. You can see how these cylinder head cover bolts have a rubber grommet on them to make them absolute oil tight, even up through the screws. You can access these 2 right behind the oil cooler, just underneath the lattice frame. Okay, a lot of times these covers are really stuck on there. In my case, mine came loose just unbolting it. But if yours is really kind of stuck on kind of hard because it's heating up and contracting with the metals contracting and expanding, sometimes they're really stuck on there. If you take a look, there's a rubber gasket in between the cylinder head, the actual cover. There's a space where the bolts are where you can get your flat bladed screwdriver in and kind of lift it up. That way you can just pry it up without damaging. Be sure your screwdriver doesn't damage this rubber gasket. Perfect. On the left side of the engine case, there's a capped screw right here with a slot in it. Most people just jam a large flat-bladed screwdriver to unscrew this to access the timing cover. Don't do that because you're going to mar up that beautiful powder coating that you see on it. See how a quarter fits in there just nicely? Use a pair of pliers and we can break it free without damaging the finish to the bike. There's 2 things notable here. If you see on the back side of the threads, there's a line cut in the threads. That's your timing line cut right into the threads. Inside there is your timing mark on the flywheel assembly. And how we're going to rotate that, some bikes you have to pull a cover off and move it with a ratchet or something of that nature. In this case, the reason why I had you put the bike in 6th gear is you could roll the tire. It has the least amount of resistance on the motor to move that timing gear. And what we're doing is looking for that timing mark. Let me get it lined up and then I'll get a good picture on the inside of here so you can see exactly what you need to see to make sure it's at the right spot. We're about halfway through this project. Now, to recap, we took the shrouding off of the gas tank, removed the gas tank, kicked it over to the side, we pulled head cover off. I've aligned the timing mark off the timing wheel. How I did that was by rotating this rear tire. You're going to get a lot of compression, so my recommendation is to remove the spark plugs. It should be noted that on the left side of the bike, I was able to use a normal spark plug wrench, but on the right side, it does not fit the opening. It's a much narrower opening, so luckily one of my other bikes that had a toolkit had one that fit. Bear that in mind. I'll throw up a picture of the conditions of the spark plugs, and I'm going to replace them when I put it back together. The reason why I remove the spark plugs is it alleviates the compression on the motor. The air could blow up through the spark plug holes, the dual holes, and you're able to move that wheel. And what I did was just gently rock it back in the direction that the bike would be moving forward, okay? So your wheel would have to move in this direction. And I would take the wheel and just gently bump it in little increments till I got that hash mark to line up perfectly. I was unable to get a camera and enough light in there to actually film that for you, so my apologies on that. I did take a picture with a flash with my cell phone. I'll throw it up on the screen to show you the mark that it is lined up. Now next, what we're gonna do is get our feeler gauges and check the valve clearance. And with the bike being at top dead center, up inside here, and I'll get a good picture, the valve should be open ever so lightly. We're talking about 1/1000th of an inch, 0.08 to 1 millimeter thickness on your feeler gauge. Your feeler gauge is nothing but different gauges, and they're all marked with what their thickness is. Okay, this is super difficult to film. So I'm on the other side of the bike, camera's on the right side of the bike, and what you want to do is put your feeler gauge up in between. If it can't go all the way through, then they're too tight. Now this is kind of the tricky part. All right, see how it kind of stops? So it's too tight. What we're going to do is loosen this top bolt right here, which is a 9mm lock nut, and back it off so it's free spinning. And then this top part, we're going to screw counterclockwise, create a ever so slightly larger gap, and then we'll check it with our feeler gauge. Okay, we've loosened the lock nut. Let's kind of back it off a little. In this case, I'm using needle nose pliers, but they make a specific tool for this. I had to stop and move the camera out of the way, but what we did was we loosened this lock nut counterclockwise, freed up this, unscrewed that just a hair, kept checking with our feeler gauge. When we got it to the right thickness, then we locked it down. Right about there is the right thickness. You should feel just a little bit of resistance, but you can still get it all the way in and all the way out. So that's good stuff. Now we got to do this 4 times. Okay, we're ready to start buttoning her up back together, but a couple of footnotes. Put a picture up above. The locking nut, they make a specific tool that goes over top of the valve adjustment screw, and it's a square top on it. So I don't have a bit or anything that fits it. I had to use a pair of needle nose pliers. Where the challenge comes is you get it all set up and you use your feeler gauge. Without that tool to lock it, hold it in place while you cinch it down, I'm using a socket to cinch down the lock nut, and when I tighten her up, I'm actually moving that screw a tad as well, so when I go back and recheck, it's not within spec. So what I had to do, since I don't have that specialty tool, was open up the gap a little further than spec, then tighten it down with the socket and remeasure. And after a couple of tries, I kind of got a feel for how wide a gap I had to make before I actually locked down the lock nut and got it within spec. So that worked for me. Don't know where you can buy that specialty tool. If I get time, I'll try to look and check it out. Here's a look at the spark plugs that came out of it with 600-700 miles on them. Don't know if you can see them. The ones that came in mine from the factory are CR7HSA, made by NGK with an R underneath it. You have a hash mark here on your wheel. That has to be in the 12 o'clock position, but bear in mind your motor is kind of offset a little bit, so the 12 o'clock position is going to be roughly like that. What I did was moving the wheel in the proper way the bike would move in this direction. I'm able to move the wheel, okay, and I would do a couple of rotations, then get it to right before it's just at 12 o'clock. Then I would go on the other side with my flashlight. I'll throw a picture up, view down the timing cover hole, Gently grab the rear wheel and just kind of bump it forward ever so slightly till I got that timing line lined up perfectly with the notch in the threads on the timing hole cover. In the timing hole where I removed the cover, and you can see a hash mark in the threads. Those two things are mission critical. You got to get them to line up, okay? And when you do so, you should be able to go over to your valves and you should be able to just ever so slightly wiggle each one of them, which means that they are separated and not touching. If you can't do that, do another complete rotation. Again, going in the direction of the way the bike would move, moving your rear tire in 5th gear in the transmission, and move the rotation all the way around for a complete engine cycle. Just remember, don't back up ever. Keep it going forward. That way you get a true reading of the points being open versus if you're going back and forth trying to line up that hash mark on the timing cover. It sounds more difficult than it is. Just follow these directions and you'll do fine. Now we're gonna gap and install the new spark plugs and then start to button her up. Now when you install your new spark plugs, don't overdo it. Get them to where it bites right about there, then give it another quarter turn and your money. Okay, the spark plugs are installed. Next, we're gonna put the valve cover on. And I wanted to make a note here. I wanted to make a point here. I've talked about my other Benelli TnT 135 videos about the valves being noisy on it and that it's normal. See this cover plate right here that is covering up the mechanical part of it? It's a thin metal and it resonates like a bell, so it chatters going down the road. I don't know if that's by design or just the way it worked out, but just know that you're gonna get some noise coming out of that cap. Next, we're gonna install the valve cover. There's usually a little bit of oil somewhere in there. Just like your oil filter, put a thin coat of oil. Put a thin coat of oil on that rubber gasket that it goes all the way around. Keeps that rubber nice and supple and makes a good seal when you cinch her down and torque her to spec. Don't forget to reinstall your air breather hose. So that sums up the valve adjustment. Have confidence in yourself. Some basic tools. Again, I'll put the picture of what I used up and the items down below if you need to order them. Full disclosure, if they're Amazon links and you click on that link and you purchase something, then Kraken's Garage gets a few pennies towards helping fund the channel. So we've got her all buttoned up and back together, no extra parts, so that's bonus points. Just pay attention to your screws. The good thing about YouTube videos is when you're like, after I took all this apart, I have like 6 different types of screws and which one goes in which. Go back to the video and pause it and look, because I made sure to take a film clip of each screw as I was putting it back in for you to view. Hope that helps you out. Pay attention to what I said about the spark plug hole being a smaller diameter on the right-hand side. Make sure you're prepared for that. Pay particular attention when you're locking down that lock nut, knowing that it's gonna change the gap if you don't have that special tool. So you gotta make the gap a little bit larger, knowing that when you torque it down to specs, it's gonna squeeze the gap a little bit smaller and get you in the right range of where you need to be. So kind of a pain in the neck, but not too bad. Now here's the acid test. Let's start her up and see if she blows up. Don't forget to put her back in neutral, because we were in 5th gear. good to go. Highly my most anticipated video, and I'm glad I got it done. It was a major pain in the neck, and I knew it was gonna be, and that's why I was dragging my feet. You have such a small cavity to get camera and good lighting to get your point across to make it clear to help people out. So I hope I provided everyone solid answers as best I can, and I will update this video if I have any changes in the operation of my bike on how I adjusted my valves. I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of questions and a lot of people that are gonna agree to disagree with me in the comments down below. Everybody seems to have their own form of opinion on how these should be adjusted. It's sad the information isn't out there. 2 thumbs down for Benelli for not getting the information out there. I hope they get an update and a memo out to the dealers so that we can get solid information, all of us, including their dealer network as well as the customer base, and get their bikes properly tuned for longevity and durability. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you want to see more in the future, hit the subscribe button down in the corner. And remember, folks, go riding. It's good for you, and I'll see you in the next one.